Faites l'appel, s'il vous plaît, monsieur le greffier.
Monsieur le Sénateur Gorst.
Présent.
Monsieur le Sénateur Farnham.
Présent.
Madame la Sénateur Ferguson. Monsieur le Sénateur Lafondre. Madame la Sénateur Valois.
Present.
Madame la Sénateur Moore. Monsieur le Sénateur Pallet.
Présent.
Monsieur le Sénateur Mezek.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Hélier.
Présent.
Madame la Connétable de Saint-Laurent.
Présente.
Madame la Connétable de Saint-Sauveur.
Présente.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Brelade.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Grouville.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de la Trinité.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Pierre.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Sainte-Marie. Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Ouen.
Présent.
Madame le Connétable de Saint-Martin.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Clément. Madame le Deputy Martin.
Présente.
Monsieur le Deputy Southern. Madame le Deputy de Grouville.
Présente.
Monsieur le Deputy Lewis.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Tadier. Monsieur le Deputy Higgins. Monsieur le Deputy Masson. Madame le Deputy Pinel.
Présente.
Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Martin.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Ouen.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Doublé.
Présente.
Monsieur le Deputy Labbe.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Wickenden. Monsieur le Deputy de Sainte-Marie.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Truscott.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Young.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Ash.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Morel.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Guida.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Pierre.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy de la Trinité. Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Lahigre.
Présente.
Monsieur le Deputy Aye.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Pershard. Monsieur le Deputy Ward.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Alves.
Présente.
Monsieur le Deputy Pamplin.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Gardner.
Présente.
Monsieur le doyen.
Notre aide soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait le ciel et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui a établi le gouvernement et la puissance de la terre, pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et qui nous a commandé d'avoir toujours pour but la gloire de ton saint nom. Nous te prions qu'il te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil de prudence, donner lesquels les affections de tous ceux qui la composent, de la conduire tellement toi-même par ton Saint-Esprit que toute l'heure de réparation est accompagnée de ta bénédiction. Réussisse au bien-être et au soulagement du peuple, qu'il te plut de commettre à leur soin. Car nous t'en prions, au nom et par le mérite de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, qui nous a enseigné de t'invoquer en disant: Notre Père, qui es aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne, ta volonté soit faite sur la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien, et nous pardonne nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. et ne nous envoie point en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal. Car toi est la reine, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen.
Madame Sansom Ferguson,
Excusez.
Monsieur Le Santé Lafondre,
Excusez.
Madame Le Santé Moore,
Excusez.
So there's a message in the chat from Senator Moore, who's having
Ah.
microphone trouble, but I understand she is present.
Well, if Senator Moore is present in the chat, then she's present for all purposes. Yes.
Monsieur Le Connétable de Sainte-Marie,
Excusez.
Monsieur Le Connétable de Saint-Clément,
He's in the chat notifying himself as present.
Monsieur le Deputy Southern,
Excusez.
Monsieur le Deputy Tadier,
Excusez.
Monsieur le Deputy Higgins,
Excusez.
Monsieur le Deputy Masson,
Excusez.
Monsieur le Deputy Wickenden,
Présent, sir.
Monsieur le Deputy de la Trinité,
In the chat I see, so we'll mark as present.
Madame le Deputy Pershaw,
Mallard.
je dirais que Madame la Deputy Pershaw est tellement indisposée qu'elle ne peut pas assister aux tâches sans exposer sa santé. Président.
Merci. Les états sont constitués. Before moving on to the next item of public business, I have asked to make a determination in connection with the answer to a written question provided by the Minister for Health and Social Services to the Connétable St Lawrence 458. The question asks the Minister to explain any reasons, including legal ones, that prevent the staff of the Emergency Department from giving advice to the public over the telephone. The answer states what the Emergency Department does, and to an extent why it does it, but does not directly answer if there are any reasons, legal ones or otherwise, that prevent the staff from giving advice. And to that extent, in my judgment, the answer does not meet the requirements of standing order that applies to written answers, and I direct that a further and more complete answer should be lodged by 9:30 tomorrow morning.
Sir,
Yes?
I have just put a note in the chat. I wonder if before we come to the next item of public business, I could make a request of the Assembly that I move P94 until after P95, please, just due to other states' business I have this morning.
Right, so you would like to move P94, which is the principles of Jersey's participation in the United Kingdom Free Trade Agreement, to after the assisted dying debate. Very well, that's a proposition as a result of the state's business that the Minister has. Is that seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on that? No member wishes to speak, then I will assume that this can be taken on a standing vote. If anyone wishes a formal vote, please indicate in the chat. Otherwise, I will take that as a standing vote pour. Very well. Yes, I take that as a standing vote pour, and the Assembly resolves to move that to change the positioning of those two debates around.
Thank you, sir.
Very well. The
Sir,
yes.
sorry, sir, I have another request.
Well, it would be helpful if members could indicate any requests in the chat, as opposed to simply participating by speaking. Yes, Minister, what is your request?
Yes, I apologize for that, but it does take a few seconds to reach the chat and you were going to start on P93.
I know, but I'm sure, Minister, it didn't just immediately occur to you to make the request.
I will not argue with you, sir. Yes, so I have been asked to remove the speech time limit on the debate for P95. So I'm using the standing order 80 to request that standing order 104A is suspended for that particular proposition.
Thank you very much, Minister. That's a perfectly proper proposition that can be raised at any time during the course of the sitting. It is open to the Assembly to suspend the effect of a standing order. The time limits on speeches are provided by Standing Order 104A, and if that is removed, the only effect will be that there shall be no time limits on speeches. There is no other collateral effect for the removal or suspension, rather, of that standing order. Is that proposition seconded?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on that proposition? No one's indicated in the chat a desire to speak on that proposition. So accordingly, I will take this as a standing vote unless someone in the chat wishes that vote to be recorded. If anyone wishes the vote to be recorded, please indicate in the chat. Deputy IEA seeks the vote to be recorded. Accordingly, I will ask the greffier to place a voting link into the chat. The vote is on the suspension of Standing Order 104A, which would remove, for the purposes only of the assisted dying debate P95, the time limits on speeches. I open the voting and ask members to vote in the usual way. If members are unable to vote using the link, then please indicate their vote in the chat in the way that's become customary. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. Are you still attempting to vote, Deputy Sutherland? Can I ask? If the greffier has closed the voting, that vote may not be recorded. Right. Okay.
Deputy Sutherland is a technical wizard, sir.
The Conatava St Clement, you're indicating you have no voting link. Do you wish to indicate a vote either in the chat? Well, you can do it in the chat. I'll allow that because you've indicated that you can't vote otherwise. Very well. Well, in any event, the proposition has been adopted. 30 votes pour, 5 votes contre, no abstentions in the link, and a further 2 votes pour and 2 votes contre in the chat. Very well. The Standing Order 104A for the purposes of P95 is suspended. The next item of public business is the draft Income Tax Amendment Law, taxation of cannabis companies. Jersey Regulations P93 lodged by the Minister for Treasury and Resources. For the purpose of this debate, the main respondent will be the Chair of the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel, and I ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft Income Tax Amendment of Law, Taxation of Cannabis Companies, Jersey Regulations 2000. The states make these regulations under Article 143AA of the Income Tax Jersey Law 1961.
Yes, Minister.
Thank you, sir. I hope that this debate on taxation of medicinal cannabis today will be more positive than the debate on charitable funding yesterday. Sir, today I'm proposing a simple set of regulations that will ensure the profits of companies in the medicinal cannabis industry are subject to tax at 20%. The regulation should come as no surprise to members. The proposal to tax the profits of these companies was first outlined in the Government Plan 2020-2023. Last year's finance law included a power to make regulations for the purpose of taxing those companies, and this year my officers have been working on developing the regulations which we are debating today. I want to say a few brief words about the medicinal cannabis industry, as I know there have been some concerns about its potential impact. I want to reassure members and the public that this is a highly regulated industry and that all applications are subject to stringent requirements before any licence is issued by the Minister for Health and Social Services. The industry would not compromise the growth of traditional open field crops because medicinal cannabis is grown indoors under strictly controlled conditions. If anything, it brings a new use for redundant glasshouses. The potential benefits to Jersey of this industry are threefold. It would support the rural economy strategy by encouraging diversity of our agriculture. It would develop a high-value ancillary business sector by encouraging inward investment and creating jobs. And it would generate revenue through taxes. The purpose of today's proposition is squarely focused on the taxation aspects of the policy, so I want to concentrate on that potential third benefit to Jersey. The medicinal cannabis market in Europe is fast growing, and that growth is expected to continue in the coming years to become the world's largest. Like Jersey, Guernsey is also fostering a medicinal cannabis industry and has already put in place changes to their tax system to benefit from the potential revenue. Revenue is expected to be raised, and members may recall that the proposed government plan indicated that the taxation of medicinal cannabis would be one of the measures that has been forecast to help balance budgets by 2024. I think it would be remiss of us as an Assembly not to act now to ensure Jersey is in the best place to benefit from that imminent growth. The regulations before us are straightforward. Firstly, companies in the medicinal cannabis industry are added to an existing list of industries that are not subject to the 0% standard rate of corporate income tax. These other industries include, for example, financial service companies and utility companies. To be consistent with Jersey current tax law, there is no possibility of income streaming. This is where different activities undertaken by the same company are subject to different rates of tax. Under these regulations, income tax would be applied to all the profits or gains arising in the year of assessment. The existing technical rules concerning capital allowances and losses would be applied to cannabis companies in the same way they apply to companies in other industries which are not subject to the standard 0% corporate tax rate. I have no intention of introducing unnecessary complexity into our tax system for one particular business sector. The regulations also define the activities that, if undertaken by a company, would bring it within scope of the 20% rate. These activities include cultivating cannabis plants and processing cannabis plants for any purpose. While there has never been any intention to impose income tax on retail activities, there is a provision to ensure that any company undertaking the growing or processing activities would not be able to distribute, sell, or further process cannabis without being subject to tax. I also want to mention that the regulations create a definition of cannabis that excludes industrial hemp, which contains a very low amount of the psychoactive compound known as THC. The purpose of this draft regulations is to catch plants that have higher levels of THC grown specifically for the medicinal cannabis market. I want to be clear that the regulations do not create any special rules for these companies. They would be subject to normal business tax principles. They would be entitled to claim expenses and capital allowances in the same way as other companies. At this point, I would like to thank the Economic International Affairs Scrutiny Panel for their balanced comments paper, which I have considered. I am glad they agree that a rate of 20% is appropriate. I am, of course, happy to keep an open dialogue with the panel on the point they raise about the level of potential revenue. And I agree with the panel's conclusion that amendments should be brought forward. As I have already mentioned, this is a fast-paced area, and I fully expect the taxing provisions and scope to be updated as the industry develops and as our policies evolve. Ultimately, if adopted, profits of the company in the medicinal cannabis industry would, from 2020, be subject to tax at 20%, rather than to standard corporate rate tax at 0%. These regulations deliver on a clear government commitment, and I ask all members to support these changes to our income tax law. So I make the principles.
Are the principles seconded?
They are, sir, yes.
Well, the debate is therefore open. Deputy of St Mary.
Thank you, sir. I hope members have had the opportunity of considering the comments paper of the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel, and there is in fact very little more that I wish to add. 2 points which I would like to perhaps highlight are, first, the matter of capital allowances for glass houses, and to which the Minister has just made reference. As we point out in our comments paper, we do appreciate the reason why those engaged in agriculture should have the benefit of such allowance. As may have been noticed by reference to the media recently, there is some question as to when the mere cultivation of cannabis expands into more of a processing situation. And the question we draw attention to is as to whether it is appropriate in a processing situation as opposed to a mere cultivation activity that capital allowance should be available. We did note at the public hearing held only last Friday that there is now a ministerial oversight group of the industry, and I hope the Treasury Minister will bring this to their attention for further review. The only other comment we make, sir, is that, which again the Minister has alluded to, there is little data to suggest that there will be an immediate impact tax-wise by the introduction of this tax, and we utter the caution, therefore, that it is a speculative proposition or hope that we are going to receive high amounts of income in the near future. But against that background, sir, we are happy to support the proposition. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the principles? Conitab of St Martin. Conitab, you can remove your mask if you wish to.
Microphone.
And the microphone as well.
Doing it this way. Right. Yeah, when I started writing, I just obviously put taxation of cannabis, and then I put, again, not enough detail. And I'm surprised by the proposition put forward, as I'd like to understand the rationale for simply going down the route of 20% of net profits. As stated within the proposition itself, it is not yet possible to forecast how much tax will be raised from these measures because the industry is in its early stages and forecasts would be speculative. I'm concerned that the availability of capital allowances, management fees, interest relief, losses, foreign ownership, etc., that we may see no tax for a very long time from this venture, and that we will simply endure the blight on the countryside of light pollution, noise pollution, security fencing, traffic, etc., to give no actual benefit to the island. We already do not have enough agricultural works to service our traditional industries, and the salaries being suggested will not create any new additional tax here either. As the product will be exported, the companies will contribute no GST and be in a net repayment situation. It is noted from the minutes of the Revenue Policy Development Board that the board decided to adopt the two recommendations that 1, the cannabis industry is taxed at a rate of 20%, and 2, that the normal taxation principles should apply. There is no further explanation within the minutes of the discussions. Could I therefore ask the Minister or any other members of the Development Board to expand on their discussions and how they were able to agree that 20% was correct when no data exists, and to advise the Assembly what consideration was given to alternative bases of taxation, for example, company turnover, or weight of the cannabis flower, or units sold, and how they were able to reconcile this likely zero tax benefit in the first years with the likely damage that the industry will do to the countryside, and the possible reputational risk of an offshore finance centre dabbling in what is still an illegal substance. I will put this on record that the 20% seems to have been plucked out of the air, that this new industry is not tightly regulated, or that regulations have conveniently are being put in retrospectively. Just look at all the retrospective planning applications and the piecemeal applications, and you will realise. And that the experts that the Minister is listening to appear in the main to be the investors. What the Minister believes that the industry will bring to the island and the reality of what it may bring, if you take into account what I've just said, are not the same. I and many others fear that we are again being led along by the promise of big money. But big money for who? The investors or the island? My real fear is that this industry is purely for the investors. Do they, the Minister and the Council of Ministers, understand what damage they may be doing? I would urge the Minister and his colleagues to revisit the story of the Emperor's New Clothes. As I've said before, I am in favour of medicinal cannabis, but how this new industry is evolving with a vast industrial unit, and I mean absolutely vast, enclosed in a greenhouse and no clear idea of how the product will be taxed or when the island will reap any benefits is extremely worrying. I will reiterate what I've already said. Could the Minister or any other members of the Development Board expand on their discussions and how they were able to agree that 20% was correct when no data exists, and also to advise the Assembly what consideration was given to alternative bases of taxation, for example, company turnover or weight of cannabis flower or units sold, and how they were able to reconcile this likely zero tax benefit in the first years with the likely damage that the industry will do to the countryside and the possible reputational risk of an offshore finance centre dabbling in what is still an illegal substance. I cannot vote for this, and I urge others to vote against. Thank you.
Thank you, Conrad. Deputy Sutton.
Thank you, sir. And I just want to raise a question from the rapporteur to ask what our relationship is with the EU, if any, nowadays. It seems to me pre-Brexit, we had an agreement with our nearest neighbours, the EU, France, etc., to be good tax neighbours for them. In that, we had a tax rate of 0% with only a few exceptions for the utility companies, for rental income, and the like of that. Have we come to an agreement with France or with their neighbours, our neighbours, to have more exceptions to the zero tax rule, which we used to have, that now been transposed post-Brexit? Have we got that such an agreement that it's okay for us to charge 20% on another category of income? That seems to me a question that needs to be answered before we vote on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Masson.
Yes, thank you, sir. Just very briefly, and I appreciate this is a proposition to do with taxation, but as the Constable of St Martin's pointed out, this whole industry does need a comprehensive view on it, and we did have those discussions around the Council Ministers table when I was there, and I think from our time on the Planning Committee, I was able to express amongst in that meeting the need for the Planning Minister, and I hope he's listening, he's now the Environment Minister, isn't he, that there needs to be a comprehensive framework for this industry, because as the Constable of St Martin's pointed out, there is a line between what is an agricultural business and then what becomes light industry, and on Planning Committee we are struggling when obviously we have objections to determine applications when, you know, in that grey area it's very difficult for us to know how to proceed, and of course so what's happening is you have different departments working on different work streams in order to support this industry, and actually I am supportive of it. I think it is a good opportunity for Jersey. I think that it is an alternative and a profitable alternative to agricultural space, but whilst we have different parts of government storming ahead, the planning framework, which is desperately needed, is lacking, and I urge the Planning Minister to bring that forward as soon as possible in order to address the concerns that members are raising in the Assembly, but I'm supporting the Treasury Minister in this proposition. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Does any other member wish? Oh, the Deputy of St Martin.
Well, thank you, sir. And from the outset, I'm going to try and concentrate on the tax, which is the reason for this proposition. And I'm going to vote in favour today, sir. However, I have to say that I'm not particularly enthused, and I've been trying to think of an analogy to use. And I came up with a sort of an end of term report on a student who's been in school for a couple of years, and let's call him Tex for the benefit of this. So his report reads, Tex came to us with huge potential a couple of years ago, and we had high hopes of great things to come. However, during the last year or so, the potential and enthusiasm seems to have slipped away, and we've seen little that is new or inspires us moving forward. There seems to be little vision and no new ideas, which is a disappointment given the potential for great things. Tex must do better and try harder if he is to succeed. Sir, there were some real opportunities to make absolutely sure this new and highly profitable industry contributed to our tax income here in Jersey. Things like payroll tax, turnover tax, maybe only a single year of allowances, but none of these have come to light, and we've been left with what is basically the standard tax clauses, which actually leave some loopholes that will mean little or no tax income for many years to come, in my view. And also the inconsistencies of things like greenhouses, where allowances on greenhouses are allowed, whereas cannabis grown in a specially designed and built shed will not be allowed. And that seems to me, sir, to be very inconsistent and can't be right. But as I said, sir, I'm going to vote in favour of this proposition, if only because we have to put something in place by the end of the year. We need to get going on a taxation regime, whatever it is. And of course, we can't change something if it doesn't exist. But as that school report says, we must try harder, we must do better, and we will have to change some of the system if we're going to succeed and really bring any income into the exchequer from this industry. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputy Young.
Thank you, sir. I hadn't intended to speak because I'm generally supportive of the proposition, but I do think I need to speak in response to the comments made by Deputy Masson and indeed Deputy Luce, which I think are important and should not be overlooked. Sir, obviously we are in a period where this industry is emerging. And at the moment, we are not yet fully able to assess what its impact on us is likely to be, either economically or in terms of the island or its environment. But nonetheless, some things are progressing. And I think I did pick up in the Minister's proposal what I think it does have logic, that there is a very, very clear difference between the growing of hemp in a field situation and the hypotonic growing of the medicinal cannabis varieties, which have a higher than, I think it's 5% psychoactive content, within what are effectively controlled laboratory conditions. So there is a very clear difference. And I think it is clear, as Deputy Masson says, that that distinction between what is agriculture in terms of growing products and what is effectively an industrial process has been very difficult. That doesn't really fit within the shape of our planning application at the moment. And so in response to Deputy Masson, I need to tell him that I did visit a number of these sites, one complete, one under development, with the Constable of St Martin, indeed the Constable of Trinity, with the planning officers and my officials, and we are grateful for the owners of those who allowed us to go round and see what in effect is being done. I have given authority, and I've asked now the officers to amend the permitted development regulations to make it clear that where there is production of medicinal cannabis in these very controlled conditions, that where there is conversion of existing structures or rebuilding of existing structures or adaptation of them, that is a matter that I think falls within a separate use, which does require dealt with under the planning system by way of application. But that is to come. That is not the situation now. That, of course, will come before the various processes. But of course, I'll be clear, it would not be retrospective. It is obviously for future developments. Members might be puzzled that there are applications around, and that is where there's a distinction between those projects where there is a conversion of existing glass houses and those where there is new construction and rebuilding. That already is dealt with under the law, but it is complex. So I think, we do need this tax structure. And I think I would just touch on one. There's no question in my mind that the processing of medicinal cannabis does have major economic potential for the island. And as long as we can manage those environmental consequences, I think it is a good use of those former glasshouse sites. I think it offers much less impact with the proper regulation of all the emissions and so on, and like the whole raft of things there that of course can be done under a planning framework. Those things can be controlled by condition. So I think that's going to be, but I do like to mention the question of field hemp. Obviously field hemp is much more established, and it is absolutely true that I personally don't think there is the same direct economic yield. That's my impression. I'm not expert on that, but of course, the end result is that they produce this thing called CBD oil, which is quite a high value product. I think those are selling for £110 a small vial or bottle and so on, and there's quite a market. And I need also to flag out that I've been advised that under the new food law that is going to have to be brought forward, particularly as a result of the post-Brexit rules, I think there will be some implications for that product in terms of what's called novel foods, where they don't really fit the regulations that are in place at the moment, and therefore things like labelling and regulation on that is something which I think will also have to be a subject for the future. So that is the CBD, sorry, it's not the, get this right, the CBD oil side. And just to mention, of course, there is also the issue of organic waste. We do have a very substantial waste product from that, which at the moment I don't think the industry has geared up to be able to fully deal with that. But I think that's a story for another day. But I think my overall point is I wanted to let members know that those issues are emerging and developing. The planning system will respond to it. And therefore members can be assured about that. But I think having a tax framework is a sensible way forward. It may well be that the details of the tax regime will have to be altered or amended in the future, but I'm sure our Treasury Minister and teams will bring that forward at the right time. But I think this is probably, this is clearly a start that's needed. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much indeed. Does any other member wish to speak on the principles? Deputy St Peter.
Thank you, sir. I'm totally in support of this. I think it is a wonderful opportunity to diversify our economy, and maybe some compromises will have to be made. But this certainly is an extra leg on our financial stool to ensure we have some sort of financial security going forwards. However, I just would like to draw one attention. There are many islanders who are benefiting the benefits of medicinal cannabis. They get it on a private prescription, which is currently, shall we say, expensive, to put it mildly at the moment. And I'd like to just put it out there and ask for some joined up thinking to ensure that those people who can benefit and can ill afford from medicinal cannabis can have it prescribed free in the usual way. We are going to be making a lot of money out of this, and I think those that can benefit most from this should have the opportunity to have it included within a state prescription. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. Sorry to take some. So I was going to just say a couple of things, but a word that was just used in a previous speech, so concerned me, this idea where we need to make compromises, and I think that we are at risk of, in the flurry of belief that this is going to be a huge money-making business industry for the island.
So could I interrupt, Deputy? The Conrad St Martin's raised a point of order. It's not clear whether that's a point of order that can wait till the end of your speech or not. Was there actually a point of clarification? Oh, I'm afraid the moment has passed because it was on my screen when Deputy Ward began to speak, I'm afraid. I beg your pardon? I think we'll get back to it. Please carry on, Deputy.
Okay. So it was the use of from the use of the phrase compromises. So when we talk about profits from this industry, I think we do need to be careful in terms of how we're defining those profits, because it does seem that this is an industry with a multinational investment structure, which is complex to say the least. It does appear to be quite a huge undertaking in terms of its industrial nature. And most of the products, it seems, won't simply be for sale in Jersey. They will be exported, they will go to countries all over the world. And perhaps many of the profits made from that will not be made in Jersey as a jurisdiction. So I think there's always a confusion as to, therefore, where do companies pay tax? Will it be in Jersey because it originated in Jersey? Will it be in the company where it's sold? This isn't on the retail arm, it seems, of what's being developed here. And I think, sir, that the notion that we will tax an industry is, I think, fair, because we will have to pay our share. It's our contract with a civilized society. But I'm concerned that we have an industry that has been promising us so much, and so many, it seems, particularly government members, have bought into this notion that this is a really big future for the island, that we may be being clouded in our view of the success of this or not. I know this is about taxation. I suppose I can agree with the 20% taxation, but I would like to see a proper definition of what those profits are and where those profits are, so that we know what we're taxing. Because the situation is going to be that early on in the setup of this, very little profit is made because of the costs and so on of setting up and et cetera, and we all know about those. That in the long term, there will be very little profit being made that can be taxed on this island. And so therefore we give access to significant swathes of the island, significant compromises, as has been said, of the rules of these, without actually having a financial benefit that we're being promised in the beginning. So I do have concerns over this, and I do have concerns that what we're being promised is not what we'll actually get in the end. So I'm a little wary about this. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Commentator Officer Martin, could you please withdraw from the chat the comment that you have made in it? Firstly, it amounts to a second speech after your first speech has been concluded. Secondly, it's a suggestion that there's misleading of the Assembly, and it doesn't say that it's an unintentional misleading of the Assembly. And thirdly, the ability to ask for a point of clarification from another speaker depends upon that speaker being prepared to give way. Clearly, the speaker can't give way if another speaker has then started. The process just doesn't work. So I would direct you, please, to remove that particular entry within the chat. Does any other member wish to speak on the principles? Senator Farnham.
Thank you, sir. Can I just, perhaps we could just turn the clock back a little bit and look at why we are introducing new sectors to the agricultural economy, and I'm really responding to some rather sort of disappointing assertions from members about this, and members, the previous speaker has talked about promises for huge returns. No one has made any huge promises about great returns. What we said is there's a great potential here, and you know, if we as an assembly and ministers and individual members start to get behind the potential, then we might give the industry a chance of succeeding, rather than trying to really stop it with assertions that aren't correct. And I feel compelled to respond to some of them because they're simply not correct. We introduced in the rural economy strategy the intention to research and develop new higher value crops. The idea of that is we could produce greater revenues from much less impactful methods of farming. So we're not planning to cover the island with great swathes of hemp and cannabis farming. On the contrary, we will use up a comparatively small area of land. The high value medicinal cannabis is grown indoors or under glass. And for years as Economic Development Minister, I was having to face questions from parishioners and occasionally members on why we're allowing our glasshouses to remain in disuse and disrepair. And now we have a solution for that, and of course that's wrong. That's causing a great harm to the island. Well, it's not at all. So I'm pleased. The planning minister, I think, explained clearly and has always been adroit at dealing with these issues, and he's been monitoring this closely right from the conception of the idea. And I am very pleased and completely aligned with him in his views and action aimed at ensuring the industry is properly and appropriately regulated from a planning perspective. So whilst we are rejuvenating some of the old greenhouse sites and returning them to their former glory, we mustn't allow an over-industrialisation. But also we mustn't treat the industry different to the other farming activity. I mean, lighter industry has to partner successful cultivation of crops. And we look at our Jersey Royal, the mainstay for many, many decades of our agricultural sector, and the light industrial requirements that accompany that activity, sir, because of the huge demands placed on the industry by the modern retailer. So we need an even playing field. We've heard from the Constable of St Martin about damage to the countryside. I mean, what damage to the countryside? There is no damage to the countryside. We are seeing improvements to old or rundown or derelict sites. Improvements. When we're not seeing vast industrial units, we're seeing large greenhouse operations that were built for the primary use of agriculture and horticulture, and that's what they're being returned to. And I thought that was a good outcome. I understood when working with other members to put the rural economy strategy together, this was a strong outcome. This is what we wanted. We wanted diversification. We couldn't remain reliant on the Jersey Royal simply because of the challenges around land crop rotation and the pressures and the challenges we face on that. So this is the result, or one of the results. There are other crops. The tea crop, for example, is something that also has good potential. We're not dabbling in illegal substances. I mean, that's a complete misrepresentation and very unfair on the strong licensed and regulatory conditions placed upon the industry. So I wanted to make that point absolutely clear. And we have amended our laws, proceeds of crime laws, for example, to allow our financial services industry to provide the business solutions for the activity in these areas. The potential benefits to Jersey of this industry, and we've been open about this from the start, are come in a number of different ways. And just for the record, no one has promised massive returns from this. We hope we achieve good returns. And I think every member who has looked at this will see that potential there, and that's what we have to nurture. But we want to encourage the diversity of our agricultural sector. We want to develop a high value ancillary business sector. And I say business, sir, because farming is a business. All farming is a business, and that will generate revenue through taxes, license fees. And of course, there will be many new jobs created in the sector, and much higher value jobs than in other agricultural sectors, because the level of expertise required is higher, sir, as we get into producing a product for pharmaceutical use. It's hard to predict those accurately at this stage because it's a fledgling industry, but this is if we get behind it and it's done properly, this could be a long-term economic industry sector that could provide, strong returns in years to come. But I reiterate, sir, we have to get behind and support the potential rather than trying to hold it back or quite frankly destroy it in its early stages. there's some tax questions which I'll leave to the Treasury Minister to answer. But of course, we did look at turnover taxes and different types of taxes. But at this stage of the game, as we make our mark on the global stage with this, we have to be mindful of what other jurisdictions are doing. We have to remain competitive. Jersey's always been a competitive tax jurisdiction, and we want to keep it that way. That doesn't stop us from allowing the taxation of this industry to evolve as the industry evolves. And I'm sure we will always work to make sure, whilst we remain competitive, we are getting optimum tax returns from the success of the sector. So I urge members to support this. Of course, the Constable of St Martin said she wasn't going to support it. Well, the impact of not supporting it is there would be no tax on the industry and they could continue without paying tax. So even those members who are not sure about this industry, so I would suggest they do support this, so at least we have a tax structure in place. From our point of view at Economic Development, we're going to work very closely with the industry moving forward to keep members informed, and the new political oversight group, as it starts to gain momentum, will ensure that the island is well placed to make sure we grow this in a very well regulated and sensible, managed way that at least gives us a chance of seeing the opportunity of this industry delivered in the medium to long term. We're not going to see quick returns, we know that, because of the high level investment, but we will see great improvements to our agricultural infrastructure. And we know that field industrial hemp, so as explained in an answer to Deputy Ward's oral question yesterday, could provide great enhancement to our biodiversity and our environment. So I urge members to support the industry, sir, and at least get involved in the accurate detail that's available, which underpins the decisions we've made to move this forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Conatub of St Saviour.
Thank you, sir. I can't believe what I just heard. All these derelict greenhouses and things we have can now be occupied with hemp, which is absolutely fantastic. Why don't we do housing on them, which would mean that the agricultural lands that we already have would not have to be sacrificed for homes, because this government and previous governments don't have an immigration policy. He's saying that this hemp is a good idea. No, it isn't. You've got to have security, and there have to be lights in the greenhouses. There's a lot to go through on this. This is ridiculous. And to bring in the tea crop, which is fabulous, because it's in the middle of a field and it's well regulated. And I just can't believe that the Assistant Minister has come out with this dribble. Sorry, and I know that's most probably not a parliamentary word, but what I wanted to actually say was definitely not parliamentary, sir, because it related to my farm. So, and the animals, and well, 2 of the males I've got on it. But no, I can't believe that the Assistant Minister thinks it's a very good idea to use derelict sites for hemp rather than use them for housing. This is ridiculous. I will not be supporting this, because it needs to be regulated correctly. And as for no tax, what we've never had, we'll never miss. But we could have people living in homes where they would pay rates, where they would use electricity, and it would be so much more. This Assistant Minister, I got out of bed for this because I've had a cold and I wasn't in yesterday. I got out of bed to come to the parish hall for this. And really, the way I feel, I'd have been better off in bed, because no, I'm so disappointed. These glass houses can be used for something that is so much better. They can be used for housing and not for growing dope. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Conatub. Senator Pallett.
Thank you, sir. I'll be brief. I sit on the panel with my colleagues, Deputy St Mary's and Deputy St Martin's, and we've recently had a public hearing with the Economic Minister, and as much as I am very much supportive of these tax regulations, I think it is it is becoming unclear about where future profits will lie, whether they lie on Ireland and taxable here, or whether the product, whether raw cannabis product will be exported off Ireland and potential profits made elsewhere, or actually made on Ireland, which will be taxable here. But in saying that, we do need to have a tax structure here, and we need to have a tax structure here for the start of next year. So I am going to support these regulations, but I think, as many have said, these tax regulations may well change over time when we fully understand where profits are going to be made and how much of what we grow here is actually processed on Ireland. I would like to just remind the Minister, because I'm supportive of the industry and I do want to see it succeed. I'm not trying to knock it in any way, shape or form, but he says that they haven't got high targets and haven't set any bar. But I'd just like to remind him of something that the chair of the Islands Cannabis Service Advisory Board said at the farming conference, which I didn't hear him actually say. I'd left at the point, but I was reported in the media, and he was, or I'll quote him as saying, "I can see the industry here being as big as financial services." Well, I think that's a very big sweeping statement in regards to what potentially this industry could be, and the benefit to the island. So I think we need to be very careful about the targets that we set. It is a fledgling industry. It's only just started. We've only got a couple of companies with licenses. But to be clear, I think we need to understand where profits are going to be made and how they can be taxed. But we do need these regulations. I hope people will vote for them, because we do need to have a structure that we can change at a later date. So I'll leave it there, sir. I think I've made my point about where future profits may lie. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. Corrie-Tarbes and Brillard.
Thank you, sir. Picking up on Deputy Hewlin's speech, so I would ask the Treasury Minister to confirm whether in fact there is a correlation between the 20% tax and free prescription cannabis to the public. There is a risk, in my view, of a South Sea bubble scenario here. There is a potential reputational risk to the island, and whilst this is the case, it may well work for Jersey, and I always like to be positive about these things. We always need to be proactive in looking to the future. But I think the bottom line, and I'd like the Treasury Minister once again in her summing up perhaps to confirm where we are on the global scene. It seems to me that we're never going to compete with the whole world, and the whole world will be doing the same thing if there is profits to be made. So I would be interested to hear her comments on that. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Corrie-Tarbes. Any other member wish to speak on the principles? No other member wishes to speak on the principles. Then I close the debate and call upon the Minister to respond. Minister?
Thank you, sir. Sorry, there's so many bits of paper here. I can't find which one I was looking for. Yes, and I thank all members for their questions. I think I have to say at the start that these are regulations to implement the taxation in advance of, and it is speculative, there's no doubt about it, as several members have mentioned, because we are not expecting to see a profit from the growth of medicinal cannabis until 2024. So it would be ridiculous to try and put ideas in, as somebody mentioned, of how it was going to be divided up into what, into oils, into we can't speculate that far at this stage. It's just a matter of getting the regulations through, agreed by the Assembly, so that we can move forward in 2022, so that we have them in place for 2024. It may not be 2024, but that's what we're estimating. I'll try and quickly answer some of the questions. The allowances for greenhouses are going to be 10%, and I know the Connaught Arbour of St Saviour was quite cross that they were being used for this, but of course they're on greenfield sites, so it's a better use than looking at a derelict greenhouse that it's being used for development. The Connaught Arbour of St Martin said there's not enough detail. Well, just referring to what I've said, no, there probably isn't at present, but there's no point in speculating on the detail until we have more information. The whole idea is just to get the legislation through. And I've said in my speech, and that was asked again in one of the questions, that amendments and meetings, whatever any member wants, can be brought forward. It's just a matter of getting these regulations through so that we've got something in place. The 20% is correct. I think that was the Connaught Arbour of St Martin, and that was agreed by the group, because we don't want to go into taxation streaming where you have different tax levels for different industries. So this one just goes with the 20% of the industries that I mentioned in the opening remarks. Deputy Southern asked about the EU. That is, yes, of course, it's been discussed, and we have there's a European growth of 60% already in Europe. In legal markets such as Germany and Italy, we would intend to hopefully be on that ladder if this legislation goes through. And yeah, I'm sorry, I said that. Deputy Luce, thank you for your support and the potential for future amendments. As I said, mentioned in the speech, we're open for discussion on any of this because it is a moving feature. Planning situation to come, yes. CBD oil is in very great demand. Of course, that could be a few years down the road before it can be produced. And as Deputy Hewlin said, it is an extra leg on a financial stool. Of course it is. We have to look at other measures to raise taxation with the Finance Centre not in doubt, but certainly the options now, as it's quite clear to anybody, that they could move the companies to anywhere in the world, and they may well do so. So we have to have Plan B. Deputy Ward's concerns over the profits was, as I said, that's speculative because we won't know what they are until further down the road. Thank Senator Farnham. No one has made promises about huge returns because we don't know what they're going to be. So use the small areas of land for medicinal cannabis under glass, aligned with the Deputy Young, the current Environment Minister. The Deputy of St. Oh, did someone? Sorry, too much paperwork, sir. Yes, I think the long and short of it is that we are open and available for more contact with anybody who wishes to know more detail. But at this stage, it's very difficult to say what the trading situation will be, the demand will be, what the profits will be. So this is really just an initial situation. So with that, sir, I ask for the principles to be approved.
Deputy, will you give way for a point of clarification from Deputy Southern?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. The rapporteur addressed my question, but didn't appear to clarify what position we were in. Have we renegotiated? Do we have an agreement so that we can have an extra exception to our zero tax regime with 20% tax on cannabis?
Are you able to clarify that, Minister?
Not down to the last date, I have to say, but yes, we have spoken to them, and of course with Guernsey, who have already implemented this. So Guernsey and the UK have got further than we have. They've already put their legislation in. So we've been having endless conversations with them and to some countries in Europe. Yes.
Well, thank you very much. The appel is called for, and I ask the FA to put a link into the chat. The vote is on the principles. I open the voting and ask members to vote in the usual way. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The principles have been adopted, 34 votes pour, 4 votes contre, no abstentions in the link, and a further 5 votes pour and 1 vote contre in the chat. Very well.
May we have the contra, please, sir?
The contra votes?
Those members who voted contra were the Constable of St Brelard, Deputy Lewis, the Constable of St Martin and Deputy Southern, and also in the chat, the Constable of St Saviour.
Very well. Deputy of St Mary, does your panel wish to call the matter in?
No, thank you, sir. We do not.
Very well. Then, Minister, how do you wish to deal with the matter in second reading? There are 4 regulations.
I'd like to propose them en bloc, sir, as there are only 4.
Do you wish to speak to them or deal with them by way of questions?
I can do if any member wants me to speak to them.
Well, I think it's a matter for you.
Okay. Regulation 1 provides that the regulations amend the Income Tax Jersey Law 1961. Regulation 2 adds cannabis companies to an existing list in the Income Tax Law that carves out specified activities from the standard corporate income tax rate of 0%. That regulation also amends the heading of Article 123C. Regulation 3 creates a new article in the Income Tax Law. The new article defines the activities that, if undertaken by a company, would bring it within the scope of the 20% income tax rate. Those activities are growing cannabis plants or processing cannabis plants for any purpose. Retail activities, such as selling products that contain cannabis derivatives, are not in scope. However, a company that sells cannabis will be caught by the regulations if it is connected to a company that grows or processes cannabis plants. Regulation 3 also introduces a definition of cannabis plant, which is borrowed from the Misuse of Drugs Jersey Law. The definition does not include industrial hemp, which contains very low amounts of THC and is not used in the medicinal cannabis industry. Regulation 4 provides that the regulations come into force on the 1st of January 2022.
Do you propose the regulations, Minister? Are they seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on any of the regulations in second reading? No member wishes to speak. Then the debate is closed, and I ask greffier to place a voting link into the chat in the usual way. Open the voting and ask members to vote. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. The regulations have been adopted in a second reading. 32 votes pour, 3 votes contre, no abstentions in the link, and a further 5 votes pour and 1 vote contre in the chat. Do you propose the matter in third reading, Minister? Minister, do you propose the matter in third reading?
If I put the microphone on. Yes, please, sir. And may I also take the opportunity to thank States members for their contributions today, and we look forward to a healthy financial future. Thank you, sir.
And are the regulations seconded in third reading?
They are, sir.
Does any member wish to speak in third reading? If no member wishes to speak in third reading, then I close the debate and ask the greffier to put a vote into the link. I open the voting and ask members to vote. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The regulations are adopted in third reading. 33 votes pour, 3 votes contre, no abstentions in the link. A further 4 votes pour and 1 vote contre in the chat. Very well. The next item is the assisted dying proposition P95 lodged by the Council of Ministers. Because the states have resolved to abolish any time limits on speeches in connection with this debate, there is no need to identify who the primary responder will be. There is an amendment lodged by Deputy Morel. Minister, are you accepting this amendment?
Yes, I would like to present the proposition as amended, please.
Very well. Are members content to take the proposition as amended by the amendment from Deputy Morel? If anyone could indicate I'm assuming then, therefore, that that is agreed, unless anyone indicates the contrary in the chat. Very well. Ask the greffier to read the proposition as amended.
The states are asked to decide whether they have opinion, having regard to the key recommendation of the citizens' jury on assisted dying, A, to agree in principle with the jury that assisted dying should be permitted in Jersey, and that 1, the Government of Jersey should make arrangements for the provision of an assisted dying service that is available to a person aged 18 or over, who 1, has a voluntary, clear, settled and informed wish to end their own life, and 2, has capacity to make the decision to end their own life, and 3, has been diagnosed with a terminal illness which is expected to result in unbearable suffering that cannot be alleviated and is reasonably expected to die within 6 months, or has an incurable physical condition resultant in unbearable suffering that cannot be alleviated. 2. An assisted dying service in Jersey may provide assistance in dying in one of the following 2 ways. 1. Either by physician-assisted suicide, whereby a registered medical professional may prescribe lethal drugs at the request of a person who meets defined eligibility criteria to enable that person to self-administer the drugs to end their own life. Or by 2. Voluntary euthanasia, where a person who meets the defined eligibility criteria has their life ended at their voluntary request by a registered medical practitioner. And 3. An assisted dying service in Jersey should be subject to the following safeguards. 1. Assisted dying should be permitted with the direct assistance of registered medical practitioners and registered nurses only. 2. The law should provide for a conscientious objection clause so that any nurse, medical practitioner or other professional is not under a legal duty to participate in assisted dying. 3. Assisted dying should be subject to a mandatory period of reflection. 4. A withdrawal of request should be permitted at any time. And 5. Assisted dying should only be permitted at pre-approved locations. B. To agree, in the event that paragraph A is adopted, that assisted dying should be available to Jersey residents only. C. To agree, in the event that paragraph A is adopted, that assisted dying should be subject to a pre-approval process which, subject to further consultation, may involve a decision made by a court or specialist tribunal. And D. To request the Council of Ministers to lodge final proposals to include all processes and safeguards on assisted dying for debate by the States Assembly prior to the preparation of instructions for the Legislative Drafting Office, with the debate on such proposals to take place by October 22, 2022, and with a view to draft legislation being available for debate by the States by the end of March 2023.
Minister.
So before we start, may I ask a quick question? May I just check which scrutiny panel this will come under? I don't know if this is the appropriate time. It's just the Minister is, I believe, the Home Affairs Minister, but this is lodged by the Council of Ministers. Just for clarity later on.
Could I ask what the purpose of the, I suspect it is, excuse me.
There's more
Deputy, I think the position is that because there's no process with this proposition for referral to a scrutiny panel and there's no ability to call it in, it's a matter for the Scrutiny Liaison Committee to consider what the correct scrutiny panel would be, I think.
Thank you.
Minister.
Yes, I can help answer that question as well. The Health and Social Security panel has been following this proposition from the very start, and they've published comments which are available to the state's members.
Thank you very much indeed, Minister.
Sir, I would like to start by thanking the Health and Social Security panel for their comments. They have been following the progress of this proposition much longer than I have, and they basically summarized everything I need to say now in those comments. Importantly, they detailed the timeline and the reason why this proposition is before the Assembly today. This is a current societal issue being discussed and debated worldwide, and Jersey should not ignore it. Also, this matter needs an in-principle decision before it can be progressed with stakeholders, in particular, the United Kingdom's regulatory bodies that we depend upon. I will also thank Deputy Moyle for his amendment. This ensures that if this proposition is successful, the next Assembly will be able to carefully examine the basic implementation principles and corresponding law drafting instructions, with the option to modify them as they would feel necessary. This will be made easier as the conversation with the regulatory bodies will have advanced significantly by then, and the control mechanisms will be clearer. After drafting and consultation, the actual law will then come back to the Assembly, sometimes in early 2023, for a third debate and more chances of amendment. It could be stopped at any of these stages, and I think it is very reasonable to ask 2 different assemblies to give their assent to such an important question. Again, this is an in-principle proposition. It is a very complete and extremely well-researched proposition, which provides answers to many of the questions this assembly could have on how Jersey would implement assisted dying in a fair and safe way. The vote today, however, is only about the principle, and this principle is whether assisted dying should be allowed in Jersey. I know that this is a very controversial issue and that states members will have had many representations from organizations and individuals strongly advocating one side or the other. Neither the Council of Ministers nor my ministry are suggesting a vote in either way. We do not recommend a vote pour or a vote contre. This will be up to individual members according to their conscience and their understanding of the issue. The only thing I will ask for is for all states members to have the courage to act according to their own conviction. I know this would come as a matter of fact on any other day, but I am well aware of the external pressure members will have been suggested to in the last few months from both sides. Do listen to them, but please draw your own conclusions. I move the proposition, sir.
Is the proposition seconded?
Yes, sir.
Very well. Does any member wish to speak on the proposition? Manitaba St John.
Thank you, sir. Firstly, sir, I'd like to thank everyone who's taken time to contact me and other members on the subject, especially those parishioners of St John who answered my call to hear from them in particular. I have personally replied to over 100 emails on the subject, and I apologise if I haven't answered them all. Like other members, I've heard some very personal stories. Stories, sir, about individuals, their partners, parents, grandparents, sons and daughters. Stories that would touch the hardest of hearts. I know that there's no middle ground and that we are going to please some and upset others, regardless of which way we vote today. I hope that whatever way people vote, that we can all respect others' views. I sincerely hope that we don't see members abstain when it comes to such an important vote. We are elected to make decisions, and while some will argue that the forming of a citizens' jury was designed to kick this particular can down the road, today we have to make a decision, either to support or reject the proposals in front of us. I've done my best to listen to both sides of the argument. Sir, I've read as much as I can. I attended the Caritas event, and I also attended the End of Life Choices event last week. Both of these events giving the attendees plenty of food for thought. Whilst I learnt a lot from both debates, I, like others, would have preferred to have heard both sides of the arguments at these debates rather than two one-sided arguments. Having said that, the four speakers all gave those in attendance something to think about, being experts in their subject. The biggest concern of Islanders, young and old, is around safeguards, and especially safeguards for the vulnerable, something I'm sure all members, whatever side of the debate, have considered carefully. Concerns have been amplified in recent times as there are a lot of people who have concerns with our current health services. Whilst recognising the many people who strive to do their best every day in the care sector, there doesn't seem to be a day that goes by without another issue: theatres, mental health, rehabilitation, etc., etc. Many people I speak to are generally worried about what is going on in the health service. People are being sent home from hospital without assessments from occupational therapists, and people in care homes are being told that they won't see an occupational therapist for 3 months. Yes, 3 months. Some of these are the people and their families, sir, who are really worried about the introduction of new legislation. So on Sunday, we received correspondence from the BMA, a well-respected organisation who have moved from being opposed to such a proposal that is before us to now holding a neutral view, albeit they are strong on the point of there being a need for robust protection for conscientious objectors. Any legislation will need to incorporate this protection, as this proposal does. A doctor who wrote to all of us stated, and I will quote if I may, sir, "As a doctor, I have seen firsthand the suffering of some patients with terminal illness, and the length of their lives have been extended by a result of modern medicine, but the quality has not. Many spend their last months suffering both physically and psychologically." They go on to say, "This is not to say that we should not strive to improve end-of-life care for all, but what we should also strive to allow those who wish to not ensure those final undignified months and years to have access to compassionate, fully legal and expert euthanasia." Sir, just 8 weeks ago, I lost a very loved member of my own family. The care that that person received from her own family and the professional carers was as good as it could be. The person in question did not want to go to hospice, but the inevitable happened and they were persuaded to go there for respite. A week was spent in the excellent care of hospice at Montcochel. Was it a peaceful death? Was that patient surrounded by loved ones as they passed, as had been their wish? Well, the answer to the first question is, we will never know. The answer to the second question is they passed away without any members of their family being present. Despite the excellent care on offer from hospice, both in the home and at Montcochel, this patient preferred to go without morphine for as long as possible, as when they took it, it confused them. Instead, they preferred to be in pain and to suffer. Sadly, that person still ended up confused at times due to sleep deprivation. Many of the correspondents we have had would have us believe that this was needed to go to a better place. Sir, I would prefer believe that there are better options. How different could that experience have been? We are talking about people who have capacity, and I'm sure others will talk about that. We are talking about people who are terminally ill. Importantly, we are talking about residents of Jersey. The proposal, if successful, would give these people a choice. The amendment puts in a second step to ensure safeguards are considered, and I welcome this step from Deputy Morrell. As the campaign for dignity in dying state, the principle underlying assisted dying legislation is that those who are already dying should have choice. Choice and control over end of lives once death has become inevitable, resulting in not more deaths, but would lead to fewer people suffering. So I'd like to quote from the JP on the 16th of October from an article written by someone who is terminally ill and has given me permission to quote. Gary Burgess wrote, "For my part, I've always found this one really simple. It's my life, so I should be free to choose what I want to do, so long as it doesn't hurt other people. What's being proposed contains many belts and braces controls. It doesn't force doctors or nurses to do something they don't want to do when it comes to assisting somebody." The two main takeaways from the end-of-life choices meeting that I took was, firstly, it's important for people to make a living will, ensuring their loved ones know what they would like in the event of serious illness or accident. And I'd encourage people to do that, whether this legislation is passed or not. Secondly, the proposed law was likened to having an emergency exit. We all like to know where it is, but we hope we never have to use it. But if we need to, we know it's there. This is an in-principle debate. If approved as amended, there will need to be robust safeguards, appropriate training and regulation. So, sir, having considered all the arguments, having read the outputs of the citizen jury, I am happy to support both the amendment and the proposal. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Conrad. Deputy of St Martin.
Thank you, sir. So this, I suspect, is one of those debates, where many members may be undecided coming into the Assembly today, and one where many will wait to hear what others have to say. So I've decided to speak early. I want to seek to influence others and to ask members to focus on the basics here, focus on what is written in the proposition and not get dragged down into the detail that is yet to come, and into a place where they get diverted away from the specifics of what we are debating today. So I made up my mind on the subject some time ago, and despite the very many letters and emails, I have not seen or heard anything to change my mind. I've read every email, every letter, but I have to say to members that I've not been swayed because the report contains, in my mind, answers to all those questions that have been posed in the correspondence I've received. At the end of the day, there are two reasons why I am resolved to vote in favour of this proposition. First, this is an in-principle debate, and I have no doubt in my mind that we need to consider this whole issue further and in more detail. Second, because it concerns helping those who have been, and I quote from the proposition, diagnosed with a terminal illness which is expected to result in unbearable suffering that cannot be alleviated. So to me, all the other words in the report and proposition are somewhat superfluous when you read those. I, like a few in this assembly, have seen the fear in the eyes of those who are suffering. I, like some in the assembly, have experienced firsthand the wonderful care that our hospice provides. However, sir, I know that in some cases and situations we can still do better. Sir, I do not want members to assume I've reached my conclusion quickly. I want to assure them that I have been thinking and considering the subject for the last few years now. But here today, this is a first step, and it's one that I am prepared to take. Even if this proposition is successful, there is still a huge amount of discussion and scrutiny to be completed before this whole issue gets anywhere near a final decision in this assembly and the necessary legislation. Sir, who in this assembly would not wish to seek to find ways to help those who are suffering unbearably, and in the knowledge that that suffering could not be alleviated? Surely, sir, what we're doing here today is to try to find ways to help others and to move forward with this issue. I know that, for my part, I feel that the very many and various objections that I have received are all dealt with in the proposition. The ability for doctors and nurses to opt out, the time for reflection, the ability for decisions to be changed at any time. Most importantly, that any decision that is taken is made voluntarily by the individual who is suffering. That decision is not taken by others, and that the person making that decision has to be of a clear, settled and informed wish to end their own life. So I'm not going to speak further, but I would only request fellow members to take time to ask themselves if they want to help those who are diagnosed with a terminal illness which is expected to result in unbearable suffering that cannot be alleviated. And if the answer is yes, which it surely must be, to vote to agree in principle that we need to look closer at this issue and do what we can to help islanders who are so very, very ill. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Deputy Lewis.
Thank you, sir. I too was quite surprised, actually, sir, to note that the British Medical Association have voted to have a neutral stance on this. So basically, we have to make the decision. There are many countries, sir, there are several countries that do permit assisted dying. Belgium, Canada, Luxembourg, Netherlands, New Zealand, and a few states in the United States of America. So I believe whilst we must do everything in our power to alleviate pain, I just feel that this assisted dying proposition is a step too far. Where does it leave people with strong religious convictions that the fact that they have technically, well, and legally taken their own lives? It's quite a dilemma. And I believe, I'm not going to speak for long, sir, whilst we must do everything to increase palliative care, I believe that this proposition is a step too far, and I will vote against this and urge members to do likewise. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much indeed, Deputy St Peter.
And thank you, sir. One of the things I've learned in my reading on this subject is, and I accept this is a broad generalisation, that those pro-assisted dying do so because of personal experience. Those against do for many reasons, however, most likely do not have such a personal experience to draw on. I go back to May 2010 for my personal experience, so my thinking on this subject is over 10 years old. I've decided not to share that experience with the Assembly. I do not think much will be gained in the debate coming based on individual emotions. I would rather stick to a few fundamentals, and also I will not dwell on the well-rehearsed arguments. We must not lose sight of what we are being asked. We are being asked, in principle, whether we support the right of someone who, in exceptional circumstances, wishes to end their life. I stress their life. We have, however, been given some high-level principles. Adults with a diagnosis of death within 6 months who are fully capable of making that decision. Jersey residents only. The option to administer the drug themselves or have the assistance of a medical professional, and that there will be a conscientious objection clause, so no medical professional is forced to do something against their will. We haven't been given the full safeguards, and that will be fundamental. But those, due to Deputy Morell's amendment, which I'm delighted the Home Affairs Minister has accepted, will be debated at a later date, obviously, depending on the outcome of this debate. Now, whilst I am in support today, I do not say I will support tomorrow. It is the safeguards that are paramount, especially protection against coercion, which I will forensically examine if I'm in the Assembly for the next debate. What I find most interesting is the names of the two pro-campaigning groups, Dignity in Dying and End of Life Choices. Let us think on the words dignity and choice. What we're being asked today is, should we allow someone who, in exceptional circumstances, be allowed the choice to end their life at a time and with the dignity of their choosing? Or put it the other way around, who has the right to deny someone that choice to end their life with that dignity of their choosing? Sir, let us not forget, it is their life we are debating, not ours. Now, I'd like to close with a quote used by Dr. Nigel Minahane in a recent speech. It's from Rabbi John Romaine, who has recently written jointly with Lord Carey, the former Archbishop of Canterbury, in the British Medical Journal in support of assisted dying. His response to any challenge is relatively simple, and I quote, "Opponents of assisted dying are welcome to live on until the last breath, be it painfully or peacefully, but demanding that someone else die in pain because of those principles is the height of arrogance. They worry about potential abuses in the future, but ignore people suffering here and now and crying for release. How sensible is it to let theoretical objections mean that definite agonies continue?" Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Pallett.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to be brief. I've held a strong view on this subject for some time. I've been a supporter of end-of-life choices for many years and believe that far too many people are denied the dignified death that they wish and that their loved ones desperately want for them. This in-principle decision to prepare detailed legislation for me is a common sense way forward to ensure that all the necessary safeguards are included in the legislation and that the public can fully consider how an assisted dying scheme in Jersey should work. Any future legislation clearly needs to be, and it's been mentioned already by the previous speaker, needs to be fully scrutinised to make sure that those safeguards are as strong as they need to be. Many people that have contacted me by email, I'm sure others as well, have had deep concerns around slippage and abuse of safeguards, and we need to be clear about any safeguards that are included in legislation are strong. One or two people have already said that, and I find it actually quite abhorrent that any group of people could deny another the right to choose. For those who do not wish to use assisted dying, then the answer is simply not to engage. If palliative care is your choice, and I've got to say that palliative care we have in the island is of the absolute best quality, but we still need to invest in it, and we still need to make sure that it is available for all that want it. But if palliative care is your choice, then that needs to be respected, but the same level of respect needs to be levelled at those who make the difficult decision that the quality of their life is so poor due to extreme pain and suffering that they choose to end it. I think most people don't want to die, but for some they want to be in control of when and where, and not be in the hands of doctors or pain management. They simply want to leave at a time of their choice, at a place of their choice, with their family and friends around them. As I said, palliative care has to carry on improving, but it's not the answer for everyone. As it's been laid out to me, I think, by many people that have contacted me, including some doctors who have obviously been through the process with families and respect the right of those who wish to end their life in a dignified way. There are many issues that revolve around having a robust law, and the word burden has been used, I think, in many emails to us, and being a burden to one's family isn't and must never be a criteria for allowing assisted dying. And any suggestion that an individual has been coerced or pressurised or even bullied into making a decision should stop that process moving forward until an independent assessment has been carried out and somebody has a settled view. It's also been suggested by some, and is an extreme view, I believe, is that we all have the opportunity, if we so wish, to end our life. Well, that may well be true, but I think in some cases, if diagnosed with a serious illness or such as cancer or dementia or any of those things, that may well be an option for some, but that is not, I think, an option that many families find easy to accept when somebody commits suicide. It's an awful thing to go to. I know I dealt with suicides when I was with the Honorary Police, and it is the saddest issue to go through with a family that haven't expected it, and it's deeply affecting to all involved. And I wouldn't suggest that as a way forward for anybody when we could have a system in place with assisted dying that would offer an option to those that have got to end of life and need another option. By the way, most of these comments I've made as I've been writing to that I'm sharing today have been made while I've been writing emails. So this is not a speech I prepared specifically. It's more around many of the comments I've made to other people in regards to comments they've made. One of the issues, I think, was around dignity and what does that mean? Well, each of us, I think, have a different view of dignity. And I think it's up to us to decide when their care becomes undignified and they wish to make a choice to potentially choose assisted dying. As much as assisted dying may well be, as one person said to me, denying natural causes, I think in terms of natural causes, I think this is true of many medical advancements, that it's actually extended people's lives. Denying those in pain the option to end their life, for me, it just is purely cruel. And those who are unsupportive of assisted dying, as I've already said, have a choice not to engage, but they should not deny others that choice. Another comment that was also made to me was around the psychological effect on family members who are present during a potential assisted death in future. Well, I think you've got to understand that or consider that against the psychological effect of a family who've lost a family member, who who has had to go through unbearable pain, excruciating pain or suffering, and watch them do that. Now, that's something that I've only had happen once to me, and I do not want to go through that situation again with a loved one. I know I would want a choice. I think many of the people that have written to me are clear that they should not be denied that choice. Another issue I think that is a relevant issue and one that must be considered is difficulty in estimating lifespan in terms of long-term illness, well, especially around illnesses such as cancer. But there are those who suffer life-threatening injuries or diagnosed with particular cancers where lifespan can be reasonably accurately calculated. And for those unfortunate individuals, I do believe that providing an end of choice life is essential if they are suffering unbearable pain or suffering. I just want to finish by saying that this is clearly a very emotive issue, and one that I think we will undoubtedly hear other speeches today from members that have had personal experiences, and I haven't based my decision or my thoughts on just on personal experience. It very much has been on the evidence that's been put to me and the views of others, and it hasn't been one-sided in terms of the comments I've received. It's been pretty well balanced, those that are for and against, but I have no doubt in my own mind that I don't want to be part of denying somebody the choice of how and when they choose to end their life if they really are suffering unbearable pain or excruciating pain. I wouldn't wish that on anybody, and I do hope members today would at least allow us, or at least vote in favour of this in principle proposition that will at least allow us to get to a point where we can look at the legislation and understand what the detail will be before deciding whether to rule this in or rule this out. For me, it's about personal choice, and we shouldn't deny people personal choice. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Conatarbs. Conatarbs and Saviour. We can't hear you, Conatarb.
Sorry, sir. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, Conatarb.
Sorry. I pushed the wrong button. I'm not too subby with this, sir. This is an in principle debate, and I, like a lot of people, have had so many emails and calls for and against. And I can only say that the palliative care is fantastic. I had both my mother and my father at home, and I took care of the both of them. And the palliative care was lovely, but neither of them were in pain. It was just a case of old age, and we've had enough, but thank you very much. I went out the other night for a meal with some school friends, and one of them, her husband, had been very, very ill and in a lot of pain. And he had asked her, I don't know how many times, to help him. And she said, I can't. And he turned around and he said, if I was a cat or a dog or thing, you would be able to. She said, yes, but I can't. And he asked her right until the very end, when he was on so much morphine, he'd lost really sort of the understanding of where he was, bless him. And she says now that when she takes an animal to the vet or has an animal put to sleep, she thinks of her husband actually begging her to put him and to help him, and she couldn't do it. And this is something that she said that's been haunting me all the way through this debate and all the paperwork that I've read. And I thought, yeah, if I had as everybody knows, if I've got a farm, and if an animal is unwell, the vet comes, and I will be guided by the vet, and the vet will say this, and it has to be put to sleep. And it will be put to sleep gently and kindly at home, not a problem. And I think that human beings should be given that dignity to be allowed to choose. And if they're feeling unwell, like this, my friend's husband, he would have been with her and he would have thought, this is fantastic. I'm going to be out of pain. She's with me and I'm not afraid. And that, I think, is so important, to have your family with you. We shouldn't have to ask people to want to travel away if they're that desperate to have their life terminated. They should be allowed to do it here. And we should be allowed to do it here, and not for anybody else, but just for islanders. And if you're here and you want to have the pain taken away and have the rest, then you should be allowed to do it, sir. And as I say, sometimes I wonder if we keep people alive so that we can still see them and they're there still with us, and because we don't want to lose them. That might be a little bit harsh, but I think that sometimes happens. I'm going to vote for this because it is just an in principle debate. I will not be in the next state sitting, and I hope that they will be debating it more into great depth. But I think people should have the choice, because it is their life. And if they're in pain and you're watching them suffer, but for what? It's so unfair. And if they're looking to you for help, you should be able to give it to them, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gunter. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Constable St Martin.
Thank you, sir. To be honest, I'd rather be anywhere else today than in the Assembly debating assisted dying. This is by far the hardest debate that I've ever had to take part in. I've been for, I have been against, and I've sat on the fence. And that is where I'd like to be right now, sitting on a fence somewhere. However, none of us were put in this Assembly to abstain or sit on the fence. I, like other members, have been inundated with emails, and I apologise that it has simply not been possible to respond to so many of them. Many have been against, and many have been in favour. This is an in-principle proposition. It is not legislation. The vote is only about the principle to do this. And rightly so, this is such a controversial subject. Some representations have been so moving, so heartfelt and tragic. Some have been matter of fact, and some have been quite aggressive. We all have to vote according to our conscience. Some, if not many, have alluded to the fact that if we even think about voting against, we do not believe in God. This is not the case. I, for one, do believe in God. There are good and compelling arguments from both sides. I myself changed sides several times, but fundamentally, this is about human dignity. Sorry. This is a very difficult and emotional matter to discuss. We have to consider the individual dying, their wishes, and not the wishes of those who surround them, however close they may be. I've had close personal experience of two dearly loved people who had unbearable suffering at the end. One in particular suffered unbearably. She had dementia, she had broken bones, she was in constant pain, the morphine did not alleviate, she was highly distressed, she was in unbearable suffering. And we could do nothing apart from sit near her. Sorry.
Take your time, Constable, there's no rush.
Apart from sit near her bed and try to bring comfort. She was in the loving care of the little sisters. This wonderful person has often said throughout her life that if she reached such a stage, and I don't think she could even envisage how awful her experience of dying would be, she'd always asked us that if she was suffering and had no quality of life, that in her words, That if we loved her, we helped her out of her suffering. This we obviously could not do. Both my parents received palliative care, but palliative care, however loving and caring it is, to put it bluntly, is not enough in some cases. Dying with dignity is the outcome of compassionate care. I will end by quoting from a 45-year-old lady who was a terminal illness and who emailed all of us. And she says, as a final point, while I empathize with anyone who has a terminally ill loved one, I must point out that they can never truly know how that person feels or what they are going through. Their loved one may try to tell them, but our brains only have our own experiences of pain and suffering as a reference point. Our brains cannot fathom pain or suffering beyond what they already know. When the time comes that the Assembly are facing death, I will afford each of them the decency and respect that how that happens is a matter for them, not for me. Please afford me the same decency and respect. I'll reiterate, dying with dignity is the outcome of compassionate care and respect for the wishes of the person who is dying. After much soul searching, I will actually be voting for this proposition. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Carter. Deputy St Mary.
Thank you, sir. As many speakers already said, this is a proposition in principle and with much detail yet to come. I have to say, so that even though it is only in principle, I would have had difficulty in accepting the original proposition because for me it did not contain enough safeguard and comfort as to what might come in the future. Having previously been a solicitor engaged in private practice and having occasion to advise many families in many instances, I can well appreciate the concerns that have been raised as to coercion, subtle or otherwise as it might be, and that is one of my main concerns. However, I will be supporting this proposition as amended, with the amendment in particular being of great significance to me. The fact that such amendment requires final proposals to include all processes and safeguards on assisted dying, which wasn't there before, does provide me with comfort. And in saying that, sir, I am mindful of the presentation given only last week when Dignitas were represented, where there seemed to be some, to my disappointment, opposition to the idea of some form of court or tribunal being involved. To my mind, sir, that will be an essential characteristic of any scheme, and I do hope that those with reservations on that aspect will have cause to reflect. And in supporting this proposition, sir, I am not in fact necessarily supporting assisted dying. I think it's important that we do proceed to the next step where all the various arguments, the processes and safeguards can be fleshed out in greater detail, and we do therefore need this opportunity to make these public for everyone to understand. If I may conclude with a insight into my private life for an interval of 2 weeks. This occurred during my introduction to the law when, as an article clerk, the then equivalent of what is now a trainee solicitor, I was much involved in conveyancing process, which in turn involved the investigation of title. I recall that in my first 2 weeks of training, I came across 2 wills where the testators had specifically, and I apologise if this appears gruesome, where the testators had specifically requested that following death, they had one of their limbs severed by an independent medical practitioner before they were interred. And I say that, sir, because it does seem to me to strike a chord with the present state of mind of some people. it horrifies me, sir, that at that stage, and it's probably in the late 1800s, there were people who believed or who feared that on death there was a distinct possibility that they might be buried alive. My email box suggests that even now there are those who believe that one of the effects of assisted dying will be to allow those suffering from dementia or some such to be somehow hastened to their end without their say-so. It is clear from the law as it stands that it is not. You have to be of sound mind, but I welcome the additional time that will be given by this amendment to enable such misconceptions to be aired out in full, and so that those who do have such a fear can be suitably assured. I will therefore, sir, be supporting this amendment simply to allow a more thorough debate to be given in the fullness of time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. And I thank the speakers that have gone before on whatever side, so to speak, of the debate they're on. And I'm pleased to see such a considered debate happening in this assembly. So this is the most challenging debate and decision we face in this assembly. It leaves us all with addressing the complex relationship between the personal and the political. I do remind members that this was a recommendation of the citizen panel set up to consider assisted dying. And we've all had many emails and communications on both sides of the debate, and I thank everyone for the emails. I have tried to answer them all, but tried to avoid short and generic answers. Therefore, time may have defeated me in replying to all of them, and my apologies if I have not managed to reply. I've also spoken to many people, many groups, and attended talks on both sides of the debate, because that is vital in addressing this issue. So I start from a position of supporting the right to choose over all aspects of our own bodies and lives, but with similar concerns to some of the people who have contacted me. So what does this proposition aim to achieve? The vote is about the acceptance of the principle of allowing members of our society who so choose to access assisted dying, the detail of which will come back to the Assembly for further consideration. And the amendment adds to that. I'm pleased to accept that amendment. By offering the choice to decide on when one's life ends, it does not mean that this is a compulsory action to be taken. Those who are opposed to this action for religious reasons can simply choose not to consider this as a choice in the same way as they do now. But for those who want the right to make this choice, given specific reason, it enables this choice. And I remind members of the proposition, some parts it says, has a voluntary, clear, settled and informed wish to end their own life, and has capacity to make the decision to end their own life, and has been diagnosed with a terminal illness which is expected to result in unbearable suffering that cannot be alleviated, and is reasonably expected to die within 6 months, or has an incurable physical condition resulting in unbearable suffering that cannot be alleviated. And I read that, sir, because I think we need to revisit what the proposition is saying frequently during this debate. So I cannot understand the feelings and emotions and physical pain of those who may be in the extraordinary difficult position of a terminal illness. And therefore I cannot deny them the right to assisted dying, the right to have a genuine choice about how they're going to end their own life and when. So I do not accept that this is the beginning of a slippery slope, the inevitable development of pressure on the most vulnerable consequently from that. It will require careful regulations and the right for medical professionals to opt out, and I fully accept that. I'll speak more about that in a moment. And so we should not adopt a system, in my view, that allows unsupervised administering of drugs used, as in some of the jurisdictions that have been quoted to us as bad examples of when assisted dying has become seen as a problem. And so as for the idea that people become a burden, becoming a burden will lead to assisted dying becoming widespread, this is part of a much wider societal problem we have with the value we give to our elderly, our vulnerable, and those with perceived disabilities. Our failure to address genuine equality and inclusion in our society cannot be the reason to condemn some to pain and suffering that they themselves feel is intolerable. We need to deal with our society at the same time. So I understand that palliative care has improved. I do not accept the premise that by agreeing to this principle today, and it is the principles, I say that again, that we undermine or stop the development of palliative care. It does not. These advances in palliative care are understood and have changed the end-of-life experience for so many, but it does not mean that those who choose to use the assisted dying provision should be stopped from doing so. Indeed, it may be less likely for some to choose assisted dying if they are not in severe pain due to effective care at the end of their life. So I mentioned that I share concerns. Those who've emailed me with their opposition to this proposition. Another was coercion. This will be the case in any situation where someone has a choice of actions and others are affected. But I believe that we can regulate effectively to present this. We also have to look at the attitudes we have to the elderly, the vulnerable, and those who we define as having a disability. And I say that again because it's so important. There has also been raised the notion that this is the beginning. I mentioned about the slippery slope, so I'm repeating myself. So this is the right for an individual to choose to have control over their own body. Fundamentally, I believe that we should have the right to choose. I will be looking at tracking regulations in detail, and which urge that a specific review panel from across the Assembly is set up to review and input into regulations. So none of us really want to consider our own mortality, and we cannot understand the pressures at the end of life, at the end of our life approaches until it happens. I believe that we need careful consider structure that allows me and all others to have control over that end of life, should we wish to do that. And I reiterate, those who oppose on religious grounds or other grounds have the right to not take this option, as does everybody. And there are plenty of safeguards. There should be times at any time where you can change your attitude to this and change your mind. I've experienced losing both of my parents and the loss of friends to illness. And so I would say that in all of those occasions, it's an almost impossible situation. But so I'll be supporting this proposition because I cannot deny those who have intolerable suffering the right to choose when and how they end their life with dignity and care. And I urge members to think very carefully about those principles as they vote today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Conor Tarbison.
Thank you, sir. So, like many other members, I've received a considerable amount of correspondence on this subject, some in favour, but many more against. Whilst measuring the quantity of such correspondence is not perhaps an accurate measure of public opinion, nevertheless, many of the concerns expressed mirror many of my own. On the one hand, nobody with an ounce of compassion cannot be moved by the stories of those with incurable illness who are suffering greatly and want to end it all to escape the pain. There is no doubt that the advances in medical science have allowed us to prolong life to the extent where one has to question whether there has been any consideration to the quality of life being prolonged, or indeed the unbelievable pain and suffering this may entail. I've seen it myself, where my poor father, who had acute dementia and many other ailments, was kept alive by modern medicine, long after his time, and in some pain and discomfort. Was it right that he should have been eased into the next life a little earlier? Was it right or not that he should have been eased into the next life a little earlier? Whilst he would have not qualified under the current criteria proposed, how long before a change to encompass those in his position is proposed? The taking of another life by another is a giant step, which should not be taken lightly, not least because there is no going back. Mistakes or misunderstandings cannot be rectified. Whilst trying not to state the obvious, it is a cliff edge event with no return. So before we go down this path, we need to be sure that we're clear about the criteria where this option is available. As members will know, two options are proposed. Physician-assisted suicide, the doctor or nurse prescribes lethal drugs that the person takes themselves, and euthanasia, where the lethal drugs are administered by a professional, e.g. by a lethal injection. The criteria to qualify is wide in scope, including both those a terminal illness and an incurable physical condition resulting in unbearable suffering. It requires that the person has a voluntary wish to end their own life. It is wide, permitting all doctors and all nurses to deliver euthanasia. It requires assessment of capability, and it requires proper regulation. So in my view, firstly, before we can approve assisted dying, we need to be sure that we have in place, or at least able to put in place, mechanisms and safeguards in place to robustly ensure and judge these criteria are met. Deputy Morell's amendment might well ensure that most, if not all, of these criteria are met. However, it does require us, those of us who have concerns about allowing the taking of life under any circumstances, to cross the Rubicon and approve the principle. And this is the key for me. The taking of life of another, whether justified or not, is, in my view, not somewhere we should go. It crosses a line which my own upbringing and values tells me is unacceptable. As a principle, I cannot vote for any proposal which allows one individual to take another's life under any circumstances. So by implication, I could not vote for euthanasia because of this, and because it does not involve a direct act by the patient. In my mind, there is a huge difference between somebody taking their own life voluntarily and this act being undertaken by somebody else. I could therefore be persuaded to vote for a physician-assisted suicide alone. If I can elaborate, my biggest concern, other than the act of one person ending the life of another, is scope creep. Many sick and elderly are not as strong mentally as those of us who are younger or in good health. They also come to depend on family and carers and can feel increasingly a burden to those around them. This, in my view, makes them vulnerable to unscrupulous suggestions, for example, of being a burden and generating feelings of guilt about this. In other countries where assisted dying has been introduced, there are doubts that the safeguards and mechanisms have been enough. There is evidence to suggest that the scope of those who are eligible has been increased, proper paperwork has been lacking, people have been coerced into the decision, and in some countries they are proposed to extend the law to include those without capacity. Will we see this if we approve this today? Who knows? Many of you will say, not on my watch. But views change. What is not acceptable now can quickly change, for example, as we have seen in the pandemic. Pressure on home care facilities, hospitals not being able to cope with waiting lists, lack of carers, can all cause us to look at things in a different light and rethink the position of scarce family care facilities to the terminally ill and the old, at, say, the expense of young members of society with better prospective outcomes. I hope it never comes about, but you can paint a picture where this might. One thing COVID has taught us is our world, and indeed our values, can change, and indeed very quickly. My fear is that by approving this, we are opening a door, and this is a door that we may never be able to close or resist pressure to open further. I hope not, but in my mind, a line would have been crossed. I should like to finish by quoting from an extract of a speech made by the Archbishop of Canterbury during a recent debate in the House of Lords on this subject. I should make the point that this is not a debate that pitches faith against no faith or anti-faith, and as this is not the case at all. However, the speech makes some strong points from a caring pastoral perspective, and I quote, "Christ calls his followers to compassion, but compassion must not be drawn too narrowly, a point made indirectly and powerfully by Baroness Meacher. It must extend beyond those who want the Lord to provide help to end their lives, to the whole of society, especially those who might be put at risk. Our choices affect other people. The common good demands that our choices, rights and freedoms must be balanced with those of others, especially those who may not be so easily heard. Sadly, I believe this bill to be unsafe. As a curate and parish priest, I spent time with the dying, the sick and the bereaved. I still do so. All of us have personal experience. I have as well. We know that the sad truth is that not all people were perfect. Not all families are happy. Not everyone is kind and compassionate. Now, no amount of safeguards can perfect the human heart. Now, no amount of regulation can make a relative kinder or a doctor infallible. No amount of reassurance can make a vulnerable or disabled person feel equally safe, equally valued if the law is changed in this way. All of us here are united in wanting compassion and dignity for those who come to the end of their lives. But it does not serve compassion if by granting the wishes of one closest to me, I expose others to danger. It does not deserve dignity if by granting the wishes of one closest to me, I devalue the status and safety of others. So I hope the points that he's made touches a nerve in all of us. I'm continuing to listen to this debate with an open mind, but I think I've made my concerns clear. And I would just ask the proposer if he would consider a separate vote on parts 2, 1 and 2 at the end of the debate. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Connétable. Deputy Aye.
Thank you, sir. I agree in principle with the citizens' jury that assisted dying should be permitted in Jersey, and that it is now time for the State's Assembly to catch up with public opinion on this important issue. We all have to face the fact that we will die, and this is inevitable. What we should now be able to influence and control, however, is the manner of our dying. Assisted dying is presently banned in Jersey and in the United Kingdom. Some people do have the option of accessing assisted dying at Dignitas in Switzerland. This is only available to those who have sufficient funds, and it effectively outsources people's deaths overseas at huge financial, practical, and emotional cost to the families involved. Some people who have used this facility in Switzerland have taken the step of sharing their stories in open letters ahead of their death. One example is an open letter to members of Parliament from Geoffrey Whaley, dated the 7th of February 2019, written before he died at Dignitas. He said, "I have been able to fulfill my final wish to be in control of my end, rather than endure the immense suffering motor neuron disease had in store for me." In his case, the terrible anguish he experienced was not simply due to the awful illness he suffered, but because of the law against assisted dying. Mr. Whaley was 80 years old and described having lived a full life. He did not fear death, but feared extended suffering in the process of dying. When he eventually got permission to be accepted at Dignitas, he spoke of the weight being lifted from him, and he was able to get on with living without constant mental anguish over his death. In Jersey, our own Alan Dushman made it plain that he supported a change in the law to enable him to have a dignified death and to die as well as possible on his own terms, when he chose to do so. He was quoted as saying, "What makes anyone think they have the right to force me to die in a particular way, a way I don't want?" He hoped that Jersey would lead the way for the rest of the British Isles and the rest of the world on end-of-life choices. Personally, I do not wish any of us to be required to go to Switzerland to end our lives, but rather to have the compassionate service of assisted dying in our home island, surrounded by the ones we love. In my view, giving the option of assisted dying in Jersey shows true compassion to those suffering and allows them autonomy, dignity, and freedom of choice. It is not for me to oppose that choice. I believe we need to act and bring Jersey into line with a growing international consensus, most recently demonstrated in New Zealand, where a referendum showed strong support for a change in the law. Momentum has also increased in the United Kingdom since the assisted dying bill in the House of Lords passed unopposed to committee stage, the first time in 7 years. Some medical professionals have spoken out strongly in favour of assisted dying, most notably a retired brain surgeon and a patron of the campaign group My Death, My Decision, who now himself has prostate cancer. He said, Having spent a lifetime operating on people with cancer, the prospect of dying slowly from it myself fills me with dread. He asserted the belief that if people in his situation knew they had the ability to choose how, when, and where they would die, it would greatly reduce their suffering. There has been some opposition from religious leaders, but by no means all. At a recent debate in the House of Lords, where Baroness Meacher presented her new assisted dying bill, a past Archbishop of Canterbury spoke in favour. I am personally moved by the words of a leading rabbi, who is chair of the Religious Alliance for Dignity in Dying. He said, "There is nothing sacred in suffering and nothing holy about agony. Compassion in the face of suffering is a key component of all major religions." Some have expressed concern that an option of assisted dying would undermine the provision of palliative care. I do not see these two options as being mutually exclusive. A person may be receiving palliative care, yet still wish to choose an assisted death. There is no suggestion that funding and resources for palliative care should be withdrawn or reduced in Jersey as a result of the existence of other end-of-life choices. The proposition before us today relates to a service being available to those who are terminally ill with less than 6 months to live, but also to those experiencing an incurable condition involving intolerable suffering. These two categories are equally important. Intolerable suffering for some is worse to them than terminal illness.
Yeah, can I just stop you there for a second? Can you just confirm you've had the paperwork sent you now?
I'm sorry, could somebody has left their microphone switched on and we're hearing background chat about papers being sent to various places. Could that be switched off, please? I'm sorry for the interruption. Carry on, Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Intolerable suffering for some is worse to them than terminal illness, as it involves long periods of pain without reprieve. Having established that I am in favour of an assisted dying law in principle, the issues that remain are to do with safeguarding and the specifics of any legislation. I believe that Jersey should proceed with the confidence that we can manage these safeguards, as do our cousins in the Commonwealth nations of New Zealand and Canada. The proposals before us today include checks that the applicant for assisted dying is making a voluntary, clear and settled decision, meaning it is not a sudden spur of the moment thing, and that they are doing so consistently. Checks by 2 different doctors and legal supervision of the process would provide assurance that there is no reasonable evidence of coercion. Assisted dying would only be available where a person is deemed to have capacity. Similar safeguards are offered elsewhere, and there is no reason why they could not be similarly established here. To summarise, I am supporting the principle of assisted dying because I am not willing to deny others that choice, and would indeed wish to have that option for myself if needed. I wish to see the implementation of pragmatic, safe and compassionate assisted dying laws for those islanders who really need them. Blocking this proposition would not result in fewer people dying. Supporting it, however, would help some to ease their deaths. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? No other member wishes to speak on the proposition? Senator Ferguson. Before you speak, Senator, Deputy Pamplin has a question for the Attorney General. Deputy Pamplin, do you wish to ask your question of the Attorney now?
I can wait till, as you've called Senator Ferguson, it's no rush.
Well, the reason that I ask is that it may offer the Attorney the opportunity to reflect before he's called upon to answer.
Of course, it is to refer to the comments paper that the Attorney General has kindly provided to all states members, and I was going to ask him for a summary of that, and in particular in point 18, the explanation the Attorney General has laid out there, and if he could just to expand on the explanation, I think it would be very helpful. Thank you.
I'll allow you to consider that, Mr. Attorney. Senator Ferguson.
Oops.
Senator Ferguson. We can't hear you, Senator.
Sorry, I'm on a borrowed computer, sir. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Oh, good. I was interested at the comment about referendums. We've had a change in the voting structure of the island without the benefit of a referendum. Perhaps we should be looking at a referendum on this particular topic. I find there were 23 members of the citizens' jury, and apparently these were all in favour of assisted dying prior to being appointed to the panel. And accordingly, the jury, so-called, was in fact self-selecting. It could also be said that those commenting directly to me were a self-selecting sample. However, in my sample, 85% were against any form of assisted suicide. I would also point out that mine was a larger sample than the citizens' jury. I had 164 comments rather than 23. And similarly, the survey of the doctors by the BMA supplied to us does not show an overall support of the change to the law. When questioned as to whether doctors would support a change requiring them to administer the drugs, only 37% supported such a change. The indications were that trainees would support the change compared to...
I'm sorry, you're fading away, Senator. We're not hearing you anymore. Your signal is breaking up. You finished. The last thing we heard was a percentage of trainees. Was the last thing that we heard in the Assembly. I'm sorry, Senator, we can't hear you. We still can't hear you, Senator. Then could you indicate in the chat whether you are trying to speak to us or? Senator, what I propose to do is to move on to the next speaker, but I will return to you so you can continue and finish your speech when the communication issues have been resolved. We now move on to the Deputy of St. Juan.
Thank you, sir. This is indeed a very significant and difficult debate for members and for the island. And I think we must start by recognising that on all sides of the debate approach this question with compassion. But there's a great sadness to me in that the proposals here and in other places to adopt assisted dying, accept that vulnerable people will be put at risk by its introduction, and accept that safeguards.
Yes, sir,
however-
I'm back. I regret that I'm actually speaking from the treatment room at the hospital, and unfortunately, the Wi-Fi in the hospital is rubbish.
Senator,
Yes.
I understand the difficulty. I have already indicated that we will be leaving you at the moment, but I would call upon you again after the next speaker so that you have a chance to sort that out as well as possible. But the Deputy of St. Juan has already started his speech. So I'll call upon you again. You will not lose the opportunity to speak. It'll just have to be a little bit later.
Yeah, I have no problem with that, sir, but
Thank you very much indeed.
I'm not sure that you can do anything about the hospital Wi-Fi.
Well, if you're able to maintain the hospital Wi-Fi at the level that it now is, we can hear you very well indeed. But I've let the Deputy of St. Juan start his speech, and I would invite him to continue, and we'll get back to you straight after that.
Thank you, sir.
So I was expressing sadness that proposals here and in other jurisdictions to adopt assisted dying accept that vulnerable people will be put at risk by its introduction, and accept that safeguards have limitations and will not always work. To me, that means accepting that we would be bringing about the early death of some people who need our protection. At present, those people have our protection because no one can suggest to them that they have an option to bring about their death. Much of the argument is couched as being given a choice over how we die. And proponents would assert a right to choose. And of course, we would always love to be in control and to have as much rights as are available to us and exercise our own autonomy. Sometimes we do need to give prominence to the rights of individuals, but no man or woman is an island entire of themselves. Every human being lives in a society, and that collective life means that we carry responsibilities to each other. And because of that, we order our society and we work to maintain a common good. And it's sometimes the case that desires expressed by individuals come into conflict with the common good. And this is the case here, and this is what creates the dilemma. This is difficult for all of us, because the fundamental change assisted dying makes will change us. We must recognize the consequences to numbers of people to whom we owe a duty of care. People who are frail and could not be vociferous in a debate such as this. And therefore, I believe our duties as representatives lead us to the imperative of preserving the common good, of avoiding harm to those people. Now, there are many points I could make, which others could make on this side of the debate, but there is also something personal to me which informs my views on assisted dying, and it relates to the best part of 30 years that I spent in legal practice when I was acting for local clients, including many people who were unable to look after their own affairs. And sometimes as people draw close to the end of their life, they have much to sort out, and not just financially. And sometimes they will confide in a lawyer or other professional in a way they cannot confide with their family. So I had those deep conversations with many clients, and that was indeed a privilege. It was not just a case of perhaps making a will for them. And this did not simply relate to elderly people, but younger people facing the end of life. So I've been thinking of many of them as we've all mulled over this question of assisted dying in recent weeks. I did meet clients who stoically lived with pain as they neared the end of their life, but were firmly expressing the wish that they could end their own life. I felt for them in their suffering, and I particularly recall one very proud gentleman who could hardly speak because his voice was rasping, and he explained to me his lungs were like tissue paper. And I remember speaking to him in his study, surrounded by oxygen cylinders and all the tubes that were attached to help his breathing. I felt for him and I understood his desire. But there were other clients, once robust and well, who'd become frail and weak. And they often suggested that they felt that they were becoming a burden to their families, or words to that effect, or that they were no longer of any use to anyone. Such things. They knew their quality of life was diminishing. Illness had brought them low over a long period, and I saw they were doubting their intrinsic dignity and worth as a human being. And for them, and others like them, they may well have felt that their pain was unbearable. They may well have felt that they didn't wish to carry on. And they might well be the sort of people who would have wanted to think about an assisted dying process. But they are vulnerable people. We need to recognize that. That feeling that life has changed for them, they're in a different position from what they were. They're dependent and they are weak and frail, leads to low mood, possibly depressive illness, mental health is poor. In the US states where assisted dying has been introduced, feeling a burden to others is now the leading reason why people ask for assisted dying. And I think that must be a damning condemnation of a society. And I would hope we would not go there in Jersey's case, but instead meet the challenge of an aging demographic by demonstrating and improving our care for vulnerable people. And so in the course of my work as a lawyer, I also dealt with the families of those vulnerable people. And we must not imagine that families are perfect, because that's, I'm afraid, far from the truth. So there were many views expressed to me about squandering inheritance on care costs. This was openly stated sometimes to the relative in care, causing distress. But in other cases, it was quite clear that they would, those views were expressed more subtly, but a sense of resentment would develop over time, which I'm sure would be felt by the loved one. I think as well as a society, we must also be aware of the problem of elder abuse. It's an increasing problem, but the extent is still largely hidden and very difficult to uncover. But it is happening, and we should not think that in Jersey we are immune, and there are many good people trying to expose the circumstances and risks around elder abuse, and that must be taken into account here. So my point is that vulnerabilities will emerge and will be all too common in the assisted dying world, whether that's internal, feeling a burden, or whether it's external, pressures applied by family or other pressures. And the question therefore is, can any sort of measures be sufficient and effective enough to give us the assurance that those vulnerabilities will not result in people or a number of people dying prematurely. And I think we must also take note, because it has not been mentioned too much during this debate, that so broad are the criteria set out in the proposition that assisted dying would be available if it progressed, not only to those who are suffering terminal illness with no more than 6 months to live, but also physically disabled people whose lives are not near their end, but who may feel their suffering has become unbearable. So that includes people that I'm sure many of us already know. People we look after in Jersey Cheshire Home, or Les Amis, or within families and other settings in the island. Now, we know that we pass through many stages in life, and that's no different for people with physical disabilities. They will pass through stages where they are down. They may feel their anguish is unbearable. Notwithstanding the requirement for a clear and settled wish to end their life as proposed, these people are not living with terminal illness, and they're not facing death within 6 months. A desire expressed to end their life could be transient. It could understandably, very understandably, be caused by a depression that had been building up in them over time. They need our support. It should be our privilege to care for them. In the future, their condition could be alleviated, or their pain could be no longer unbearable to them. But in a dark period of their life, they might have taken the option of assisted dying. Now, to me, that is vulnerability. So faced with all these vulnerabilities, is there a means of protecting these people? Are safeguards sufficient? As a patient approaches end of life, the doctors discuss end of life care with them. For a person with incurable conditions, long term, I'm sure doctors have, and I know doctors have, serious debates with them about how they want their care to be handled. If assisted dying becomes part of the law of the land, our doctors would become professionally obliged to discuss the option of assisted dying with all patients who meet the broad criteria in the proposition. That's something new. And if you're in a vulnerable state and your doctor opens up a conversation about choosing to end your own life, even if that doctor is being entirely neutral about it and acting in the very best interests of their patient, what is the effect on the mind of that vulnerable person? Some will cope with it, but some, being vulnerable, being depressed, may think the suggestion is being made, put before them, that they are no longer worthy. They are truly a burden, and perhaps the time has come. Even if 2 doctors were appointed as proposed, even if both speak to the patient and the family, such a process cannot provide the assurance that they've teased out the true motivation of their patient, that they've established the request is truly voluntary and has ruled out any suggestion of mental ill health. Realistically, it cannot discern the subtle pressures applied over time by family, friends, or carers, or even if those pressures are not overt, by a growing but inaccurate perception of becoming a burden. Not only would the doctor's time with the patient undoubtedly be limited because of other professional obligations, it would be very unusual for any doctor nowadays to have that kind of deep relationship with their patient that we may have treasured in the past. That means a doctor may not be in a position to detect undue influence or even that their patient was feeling a burden. And I question, how could the involvement of courts or a tribunal add anything? Yes, I'm sure a court could ensure a process had been followed. It could demonstrate that the required questions had been asked, all those sort of process issues. But a court is unable to make a finding on what is deep in the heart of a patient. So safeguards can be built up and to the best of our ability, but none of them can be truly effective. None of them would truly protect patients who are going to become vulnerable if assisted dying were to be introduced. And I think we are beginning to learn from the experiences of other jurisdictions where citizens are becoming seriously alarmed at the failure of safeguards in use there and which are suggested in this proposition. So if, having been introduced in other jurisdictions, we see that the safeguards are not up to scratch, but there is very little that can effectively be done, why do we need to start on this road now? The prohibition on killing is the safeguard. The safeguard we have now and is the only effective safeguard. So the current law provides the protection for the vulnerable. And I fear we have a misplaced trust in the ability of a law to fix this, because laws don't have that capacity at the end of the day. The question of the motivation of an individual is not medical or legal, but it's a personal, social and domestic issue, which is outside of the expertise of doctors and lawyers, and it's very difficult to divine if somebody is approaching it feeling themselves under a burden or under coercion. So, sir, assisted dying will change our society fundamentally. It starts calculating and determining a value to human life. That leads to an inevitable change in attitude, because we're introducing a choice over the end of our life and for those with incurable conditions. And there'll be some who criticize choices that others make to preserve life and the resources that are involved following that choice, because there are resources involved in care. Over time, we will become desensitized to the value of life. So to me, it's no wonder disability groups around the world have generally opposed assisted dying. Our medical culture will also be corrupted. How valuable at the moment is our doctor-patient relationship, when we know that when we're vulnerable, when we're low, there is that certainty that our doctors are there to preserve life and not to put other options around. Assisted dying would undermine our efforts around suicide prevention. And this has been seen in other jurisdictions which have seen rates of suicide climb. Our assisted dying would compromise our palliative care efforts. The excellent service we have can be even better, and I would want to make it better. Practitioners in palliative care assure us that it's very rare that that care cannot address and alleviate pain at the end of life. And surely that is where we should concentrate efforts. Significantly, it is the medics in palliative care, the people who are often closest to those who might be candidates for assisted dying. It is they who are strongly against adopting assisted dying. They know and they practice the better way for their patients. So as I said at the beginning of my speech, all of us want compassion and dignity for those coming to the end of their lives. But it doesn't serve compassion if by granting the wishes of one, we expose others to danger. And it doesn't serve dignity if in granting the wishes of one, we devalue the status and the safety of others. And therefore, sir, we should resist this change, the change this proposition needs to make, and vote against this proposition. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Senator Ferguson, are you now in a position, do you think, to speak?
I hope so, sir.
Very well. Would you like to resume your speech?
Sorry?
Would you like to resume your speech then?
Thank you, sir. The correspondents to me, correspondents were concerned that this approach, excuse me, is a version of the disposability culture. Just because you're old or disabled, does this give society the right to terminate you? Will this open the door for the unscrupulous to terminate well-to-do aged relatives? Or will it open the door to more Dr. Shipmans? And what about the stress it will place on doctors? The mental effect on people dedicated to healing when faced with termination of life rather than preserving it must be significant. And this is apparent in the response to the survey by GPs. There were also examples quoted to me where the medics had given a prognosis of weeks or a few months. In those instances, the patient outlived the prognosis by years, much to the delight of their families. With great respect to the medical profession, they're not 100% infallible. I am supportive of freedom of choice and of free speech. However, given the fallibility of mankind, should we be legislating for the exception rather than the majority? Some will say this gives everyone the freedom of choice in the manner of their dying. But given the experience of countries who allow this, would take away security from the aged and infirm. Are we really going to put the oldies, and I'm one of them, who might have a few pounds put by, in a position to be frightened that their nearest and dearest will persuade them that they are becoming a burden and that it would be fairer to die now? If the elderly can be blackmailed like this, how much worse would it be if they're being persuaded to be assisted to die? One correspondent told me that she was on holiday with her disabled child when a Belgian lady asked why she had not had the child euthanized. Is it not better to have a society where the old provide a haven for the young if the parents are having to work? A haven where the young can let off steam about the perceived injustice inflicted by parents, which always happens. A haven where grandparents can advise and guide grandchildren patiently from their experience. Grandparents have time where parents may be run off their feet. Do not take that experience away from the family. Do we really want a society where the elderly and disabled are not permitted to live? A society where the young treat the old as a waste of space instead of learning from them and appreciating them? It is the worst nightmare from science fiction. I say no. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much indeed, Senator. Mr. Attorney, you've indicated you're now able to advise. This may be a good time, if you're able to do so.
Yes, sir. So Deputy Pamplin's question asked me to refer to and expand upon paragraph 18 of my comments, which were circulated to members last week. So paragraph 18 deals with safeguards, and particularly from a human rights law perspective. And so I will expand upon those three subparagraphs shortly. But before doing so, sir, I just wanted to be clear that the comments that I make are obviously in relation to the proposition being an in-principle proposition, and clearly, sir, we don't have detailed legislative formed proposals as to what, for example, the regulatory regime will be. So clearly, sir, my comments are simply directed at the principles and not at the detail of any in practice legislative framework. And so I would also say that, as I say in paragraph 2 of my comments, they're simply restricted to the legal aspects of the proposition, and there's no view in them on the wider ethical or policy issues raised by assisted dying. So in terms of paragraph 18, as I said, sir, they deal with the safeguards that are included in the proposition, particularly at paragraph little Roman 3 of the proposition. And I also set out an examination of three safeguards in brief in the numbered 3 paragraphs of paragraph 18 of my comments. And so those 3 paragraphs, the structure for them is taken from an ECHR case, a European Court of Human Rights case, which is the case of Lambert against France, which was a case from 2015 and a judgment of the Strasbourg Court. So that was a case which was a withdrawal of treatment case rather than an assisted dying case. But the principles from the European Court of Human Rights judgment are helpful, and they are consistent with other cases where the Strasbourg Court has specifically considered assisted dying or euthanasia cases. And so the structure for the 3 points is taken from paragraph 143 of the judgment in Lambert, and there the Strasbourg Court sets out 3 factors which are safeguards in the context of withdrawal of medical treatment cases, but which are also relevant to assisted dying cases. And the 3 factors that are specifically stated in paragraph 143 are the existence in domestic law and practice of a regulatory framework compatible with the requirements of Article 2, and Article 2 is the right to life, which is in the European Convention on Human Rights, which we've incorporated into our law in the Human Rights Jersey Law of 2000. And then the second safeguard is whether account had been taken of the applicant's previously expressed wishes and those of the persons close to him or her, as well as the opinions of other medical personnel. That's the second factor. And then the third factor is the possibility to approach the courts in the event of doubts as to the best decision to take in the patient's interests. So those are the 3 safeguards that are specifically mentioned in the Lambert judgment of the European Court of Human Rights, and my comments in paragraph 18 follow those three factors that have been identified by the Strasbourg Court as safeguards. So the first is that it would provide for the establishment of a precise and transparent regulatory framework. And then the proposition also incorporates the essential requirement that the competently expressed wishes of the applicant are paramount. And then the third factor is that the proposition includes the possibility of approaching a court regarding whether the decision is in the person's best interests. And I say, sir, that the ability to challenge an assisted dying decision or indeed a withdrawal of treatment case by application to a court is a minimum safeguard. In this case, sir, the proposition at paragraph C goes slightly further than that, in that it envisages a pre-approval process, which would be via a court or specialist tribunal for all cases which fall within the ambit of the proposition. And as I say, so I don't consider that the involvement of a court or specialist tribunal at the initial eligibility stage is required by the European Convention on Human Rights. But as it is included in this proposition, plainly, sir, it is an additional safeguard which is likely to weigh in favour of the proposition being compatible with the European Convention on Human Rights. So I hope that's of assistance to Deputy Pamplin and to members. But I would also say, sir, that the judgments of the Strasbourg Court are clear that states are afforded a wide margin of appreciation in this area of assisted dying and withdrawal of treatment cases. And that's because the Strasbourg Court accepts that there isn't consensus amongst states, amongst contracting states, on this area of policy. And so the Strasbourg Court is going to afford states, it says, a considerable margin of appreciation. But in Lambert, the court was also clear that it's not an unlimited margin of appreciation, that there are minimum standards, minimum safeguards that the court expects a state to have in this area. And those are the three sorts of safeguards that I've summarised at paragraph 18. So I hope that's of assistance to Deputy Pamplin and to members. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Attorney. Senator Mezek, I'm sure you, well, I'm assuming you would not wish to start your speech now.
And so I anticipate that I would probably go on for maybe up to 15 minutes. So I suppose it's up to members whether they want to leave me till after lunch. But I'm easy either way. I'll start now if members would prefer that.
Well,
propose the adjournment, so if I may.
The adjournment's proposed. It is an appropriate time in my view if no one opposes. Very well, the Assembly stands adjourned until 2:15.